ready to roll now.
Epic, let's go.
Dom, how are you?
I'm good. We've been yapping.
We have been yapping. It was a bit of a process to get you in here because you got lost down near the Coca-Cola sign. Don't.
Yeah. I'm a local and I got lost. It was embarrassing.
Well, that's all right because I'm not much better. I was wandering the streets today looking for parks and trying to find my way around. So it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
I was saying to you before, you popped up in my Instagram world just recently, and I love what you're doing with the podcast.
Thank you.
I love and am probably more passionate than people would realise about health and wellness and well-being, because I don't have a lot of well-being guests on the pod. I guess this is kind of just taken different directions, but for me it's nice to come back to that because I think the essence or the top value of anyone should be their health and the way they look after themselves. And you seem to do an incredible job of that. I've listened to a few episodes of your podcast because I wanted to get an essence of how you are and how you approach those things. And to me, it sounds like you approach them for someone who is in that world as a living. You approach it with incredible balance, which I really appreciate. Do you think that's a fair statement?
Yeah, I think absolutely. When I think about the word balance, it's quite interesting. What comes top of mind for me at the moment is I went from being sober curious because I thought having a few drinks is part of balance, to now deciding to quit alcohol. And I think it's kind of coming to terms that your balance changes as you change. And for some people in their life and what they're going through, it could be working hard, but that's what they need at the time. But for me right now in my life, what balance means to me is what we were speaking of Mike a little bit about, outsourcing certain things so I can have a little bit more time, and removing alcohol because for me, I want to invest my energy into my passion. And I'm sure you relate to this. When you have a passion and purpose, like balance can get thrown out the window because you become obsessed with what you do. And I'm obsessed with what I do. So maybe to some people I don't look as balanced because I just love what I do. But for me right now, I feel more balanced, more authentic, and more true in myself than I ever have in my entire life.
I love that. What a great way to be, especially as you head into, and I've spoken about this a couple of times on the podcast recently, we head into the end of the year.
The silly season.
Yeah, and it's a silly season, but it's also a naturally very reflective time.
Yeah.
And I think if you can look back on the year that was, or even the couple of years that was, and feel like you're in a really good place, that you're doing the things you love and you feel you get equal amounts fulfillment and challenge back from those things, I think it's a great place to be. And I guess if I look at what you do, you wear many hats. You've got the podcast, of course. You've got these business ventures, which I got a beautiful little gift today.
Yeah.
The journal. So thank you so much. The self journal. And you're also in the modeling world, which is a huge part of what you do.
Massive.
I think it would be maybe an assumption of many people that if you're in the modeling world, you must feel incredibly certain about yourself. You must feel like majority of your life is dedicated towards how you look as opposed to how you feel. I know that all of those things can be misconceptions for people within your world. I wonder what your relationship is with yourself when you look in the mirror and assess how you feel about yourself as a person.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting how you talk about being certain of yourself and that relationship to modeling and being a model, you would be so sure of yourself. And I found that when I was really at the height of my career, working all the time, that was when I had the most insecurities. That's when I left set, I was in a really dark place. You're almost putting on this mask when you enter, so kind, giving everything. Like to be a successful model, you have to have that energy. And I would give it all and I would give nothing to myself. It was so hollow. My self-talk was so bad and it led me down a really bad path. I was insomniac, anxiety. I had to have red wine, sleeping pills every night to fall asleep. I thought that was my life. I thought I'll never be able to be pregnant because I can't imagine not drinking. And people would see me as like a healthy person because on the exterior, maybe I looked healthy, but inside I was far from it. And that self-talk was so bad. And that's what did get me into journaling, because that's really what pushed the needle in transforming me and realizing that mindset becomes the most important thing. Without your mind, you're nothing. So yeah, I think that was when I was the least sure of myself. And now I still model a lot. I'm so grateful to still be doing it, but I'm in a place where I look in the mirror and I know my worth is so much more than my appearance. And I think a big thing from that comes from having a purpose outside of modeling. And I think a lot of models who are young, I do a lot of mentoring with IMG and the development girls. And I always tell them, have something else that you love, because it will eat you alive if you're just doing modeling, because you're going to compare yourself to others, and you need to be in your own lane and have something that drives you. And so for me, the passion of journaling, I didn't think that could become a job. But if you love something so much, anything can become a job. We've seen that with TikTok. I mean, people are making so much money unwrapping presents or showing whatever on these platforms. So yeah, my biggest thing now is I feel more certain of myself now, and I probably don't get as much attention as I did when I was younger. So it's interesting.
It's fascinating, this topic, because I heard Chris Williamson speaking about something similar recently, which I think is a good example to refer back to. So bear with me here.
Yeah.
He said type A people, the go-getters, the very motivated, disciplined people, often have type B problems. They struggle to relax, take some time, be a little less disciplined, find that balance in their life, which we spoke about before. And type B people have type A problems. They find it hard to be motivated, to be disciplined, to do the hard work. And when you hear a type B person speak about their type A problems, you naturally have more compassion for them because, well, yeah, the hard stuff is hard, and it's hard to get off the lounge, and it's hard to be disciplined. If you hear a highly successful type A person say, I really struggle to relax, you're like, all right, buddy, you'll be right. It's almost maybe similar when a model says, hey, I don't feel good about myself and my relationship with myself isn't where it needs to be. There's likely very little compassion that comes with that because you have what most people think they want.
That's very true.
Yeah.
I see what you mean.
And there's a parallel between how you would feel and how anyone else would feel that kind of isn't treated with the same respect. And I think it's a great reminder for anyone at all times that everyone is challenged by similar things, but everyone's on their own journey trying to figure out how to navigate their life and to do it with respect and pride for themselves and be able to look in the mirror and care for the person they see. You speak about those moments of realization where you recognize that your relationship with yourself isn't healthy. Were you always aware of that, or did it take some kind of event or intervention to figure that out?
I'm sure a lot of your guests come on here and talk about that rock bottom, and you sometimes do need to hit that rock bottom to kind of force you to try something new and catapult in a new direction. And my rock bottom was I hadn't had a solid night in years of sleep. It was debilitating, and I started having awareness that something was wrong when little things would happen, like me taking the red wines from the plane, like on the Qantas flight. Like, I was like, oh my God, like I'm 24, 25 years old. I shouldn't be like this. And that really was my rock bottom. And I remember calling my best friend and I said to her, I don't know what to do. My agencies told me I need to put on weight, so they weren't putting me on work at the time. So I'd lost that identity. I couldn't sleep. I'd lost my relationships, and I was very much leaning towards going on medication, which I want to always say has its role, and I understand that. But there was this inkling that there's something else I could do and that this can't be my life forever. And I spoke to my friend and she said, why don't you try writing down your thoughts? And when I wrote down my thoughts, my life didn't change forever, but I had a micro shift, a little bit more ease. And I kept sticking to this routine, and that allowed me to get the restful night's sleep, which allowed me to then focus on mindset, realize how important it is. Did an Ayurvedic meditation course, and then COVID hit. And that was, I know it was a really terrible time, and I acknowledge that. But for me in my personal life, I needed a break. I needed a break. And it allowed me to just step back and just think about my life, think about my habits, really big life realizations. So those were a few things that kind of gave me that awareness that you speak of. And the biggest thing that gave me awareness was last year I did a purpose course, and you go through 6 different, your vehicle, you go through your goals, you go through your traits. Like, you really dive deep and you ask yourself really hard questions that no one ever wants to ask themselves. And I found out my purpose, and it was to inspire others to live a healthy and fulfilling life. And it's funny you use the word awareness. The problem I want to solve in the world is unawareness. I walk around with these tools in my toolkit of meditation, gratitude, movement, connection, and now sobriety in that belt. And I'm like, people are unaware of how magical life can be when you get your dopamine to baseline, when you're not comparing yourself, when you're taking time off social media. Like, really simple things can change your life. And yeah, those moments of awareness led me to realize my purpose was to help the unawareness in this world. So yeah, that's kind of the timeline that I've seen in my life. And those hardships were so worth it. So anyone who's listening, who's going through a tough time, like, it will get better.
Yeah, it does. And that is the hardest thing to believe when you're in the thick of it, is because you can't often see the light out, and you are often like searching for the curtains to pull them open and see the light through the window or the way out of the situation that you're in. And sometimes it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of time and moving in the right direction and little steps. I was speaking to a guest on Wednesday who spoke similarly to you about that COVID period as an incredible moment of stopping, reflecting on, for him it was, things are going okay, so there's no need to change, but there's more in me. There's something else to discover here. And I think that time, regardless of how difficult it was, maybe economically for people, from a health and sort of fear perspective, with all the narratives in media and the information we're fed so consistently, I think it was an opportunity, regardless of whether you thought you needed it or not, to just stop.
Yeah.
Unless you worked in the hospital system, then it was hectic. But for you, uncovering what you felt to be your purpose, you make it sound really easy there. Did it feel easy, or was it more difficult maybe than you had imagined?
I guess like the inner critic that was once pinpointing everything I didn't like about myself was now pinpointing this. You're going to share this really vulnerable part of you online. Like, I'm sure you having a podcast, I can imagine when you launch your first episode, it's like crippling, the anxiety to share more, especially as a model. All I ever showed was my exterior, and now I was like really taking away anything and just laying it out on the table. And even before, you're like, are you happy to talk about anything? I'm like, yeah, I'm an open book. And I feel like that does come with time. It definitely wasn't easy finding my purpose, and there was definitely stops and starts. But as I said, like, I started modeling when I was 15. So for that decade that I had the highs and lows, it always came back to mental health. It always came back to wellness. Like, when I would feel my best was when I just stripped away the work, stripped away everything, and went back to those basic practices that I spoke about. So it was kind of just realizing that that can become a job, or that can become a purpose. It definitely wasn't streamlined, and I definitely want to make that clear for any listeners. It took time. Like, I mean, there was the purpose course, which took months, launching the podcast and having a few listens at the start where you're like, oh my God, is anyone ever going to listen to this? To now where I am, like, yeah, I am really proud of myself, but it was a decade of me talking terribly and having really bad habits for me to have a realization.
When you had your realizations, did it put modeling as an industry under the microscope? And was there any feeling of, should I continue to play in this space, or should I maybe leave it?
Look, I'll be completely vulnerable with you. I think when you start your purpose and your passion, to let go of the financial, which is modeling, is quite difficult, because that allows me to then put that money into creating the journal, hosting events, doing a podcast without ads. It's expensive. So I did need to keep it there, but I've definitely become more selective with what jobs I shoot, what brands I work with, because I can. But at the start, it didn't really change that. In terms of an ethical standpoint, I think one really positive thing we've seen on Instagram and in the social space is we want realness. Like, humans are craving real and authentic content. The well-polished stuff doesn't do well. When you share, you know, even 2 days ago I had a colonoscopy because my mum has bowel, like, she's got stage 4 cancer, my mum. So that's been a whole journey, but her first diagnosis was bowel cancer. So I wanted to check up on me, and, you know, it's quite an uncomfortable thing to share about, but I was like, I have to share this. Like, I'm so proud and loud now with what I stand for and what I do that, you know, that's the content. That content does better than when I post a modeling photo. So I think in terms of, like, maybe 5 years ago the industry was different, but now when I look at it under a microscope, I do think there's a lot more diversity. Brands want to work with people who have a story. I think brands want realness. We're craving it as an audience. We're craving, like, I recently went through some hormonal changes and my skin broke out terribly. And I remember scrolling through Instagram and thinking, why is there no representation of blemishes? Why does everyone have such beautiful skin? It's making me feel so low. That was an eye-opener for me, because how many people are dealing with that all the time? And there is still so much Photoshop happening in the industry, even though they want to say there isn't. There is still that sort of stuff happening. But yeah, in 2024, I'm pretty proud of the industry.
Yeah, that's a big statement. And I think there's so much truth to what you're saying, because I look online, and as you know, you speak about the blemishes, I struggled really bad with my skin until I was
Your skin is beautiful now.
Well, thank you. Cheers. But it took so long. Through my teen years, I had really bad cystic acne, and it would come in doses. Like, it would be so perfect and great, and then it would go crazy, and I would sort of retract into my shell, or retreat into my shell, I should say. And I think that, yeah, I agree with you. Even as I'm all for striving to be your best. But I look online and I go, far out, nearly every dude's got a six-pack and is absolutely shredded now.
I think, on a side note, for men it's a lot harder. I always think about this. When you see modelling jobs with a bunch of women, you've got different body shapes, diversity. But I think in the men, modelling for men, it's always the guy with a six-pack who's tanned and tall. I don't think there's much diversity for men. And I think that would be really hard on your mental health.
It's interesting. I'm so blessed that I have a beautiful fiance who just loves me to bits. So, you know, and I keep in relative shape. So I don't feel like I'm that far away from being in the shape I want to be most of the time. And I'm relatively chill about my aesthetic shape. Of course, I take pride in making sure I eat well and trying to stay in good shape, because I care about the way I present myself. I think a little bit of vanity in anyone is healthy, right?
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't become uncontrollable. But I think certainly I've heard a lot of guys speak about the male body dysmorphia potentially overtaking female body dysmorphia in the next couple of years. And I think a big part of it is you look at these guys online who are training, and steroid use is far more profound than it was 5-10 years ago. If you look in the sharps container at a regular commercial gym, there's needles everywhere.
Really?
Yeah, 100%. You walk into any commercial gym, and especially for guys, take note, if you go into the men's bathroom and you look at the sharps container, it's basically overflowing. There's more guys on anabolic steroids or peptides or SARMs than ever. And I think that potentially similarly for women, there is more manipulation of images online than ever as well. And so you have to have a really good relationship with yourself, I think, if you're indulging in that kind of stuff on social media. And that takes time and it takes practice. And I think it's a skill, you know. And I wonder for you, when you're going through that change in your life where you're starting to fortify your mindset, be a little kinder to yourself, have some more self-compassion, what was your relationship with social media like?
It's so funny because as someone who uses social media for their job, you think that your relationship with it would be really good. And it does come and go in ways. I think the biggest thing for me is I realize I'm the most happy, or I'm the happiest, when I'm literally not on my phone and it's locked away and I'm with my boyfriend and I'm with my dog and we're happy. So it makes me think every time I'm on my phone, I mean, I'm sure you've looked into the dopamine and the science behind it. It's like they're doing it so that you do get addicted, and they push the content that you look at the most, not necessarily that you're engaged at. So like you might look at the post the most of some amazing body, but you don't want to see it, but they'll keep throwing it at you. I think, as you get older, you kind of realize this is fake. And I think when you do have a social media presence, you know that it's a highlight reel. I actually think when you don't have a social media presence, it's harder to realize that is a highlight reel majority of the time.
I want to pull on a thread that you just mentioned there, because I think this would be really nice for context for anyone. It certainly looks very different. Something I wrote in my journal recently was, I think one of the most noble things I can do professionally is continue to curiously explore other people's lives, to highlight the fact that a great life, a fulfilling life, can look different for anyone. There's a million different ways to live your life in 2024, heading into 2025. And I think there's something incredibly beautiful about that, because no matter who you are, no matter where you're located or how you're wired, there's a way for you to go about your most fulfilling life that I think is refreshingly more accessible than you realize. So for you, you speak about when you're most happy. What does a day, a week, a period of your life in which you feel very happy and content actually look like?
Yeah, well, for me, there's kind of two narratives here, because one narrative is, I think, about my flow state. I talk a lot about this flow state when you don't even realize time is going by. And I hosted a wellness retreat. It was the first time I became a qualified Pilates instructor. It was the first time I taught. And I just felt so in flow state. I felt so happy. I was meeting all these amazing like-minded women. We were speaking so openly about our health and our hormones. And it was just such a safe space. And I think that was a really high moment for me. And that was a happy, like, pinnacle of happiness right there, which is what keeps me aligned. And then on the other narrative, it's literally doing nothing, no phone, just with Tom and Crumble. And
great name for a dog too.
Right?
Yeah.
So good. Just walking Bondi to, like, the simplest of things. And what came to mind when you were speaking about happiness, and I guess people thinking it's so far out of reach, is I go to Bali so much and you see people there with nothing. And they're smiling from ear to ear, all of them. And I'm like, us Westerners got it wrong somewhere along the line. And I'm sure you're the same. I mean, you said you don't have that many wellness people on the podcast, but so many of these wellness things that are coming into play, like the mouth tape, the ice baths, breath work. People have been doing these for centuries, like tribal things. And in the modern world, we've just gone so far gone. And in that time, we've gone away from it. We've become unhappy. We've become disconnected. And yeah, the simple things that Tom actually does breath works. We'll do breath work together. We'll just really ground ourselves. And I think people might be listening. This sounds woo-woo. This boy and girls in their room going, but I'm like, just trust me on it. Because those simple wellness hacks will bring you into your body, bring you into your space, make you so present with everything around you, the world around you. And yeah, I was talking about dopamine before. Like, everyone's dopamine is just so out of whack because we're getting stimulated all of the time. And the way to bring your dopamine back to baseline is fasting. It's like removing social media. It's removing everything so that when it's a beautiful sunrise, dopamine rises. When you're having a delicious meal, dopamine rises. You don't always need to chase these big, crazy nights, which I think we see a lot of in the eastern suburbs in Sydney and these areas. So, yeah, they're my two narratives of, like, pure bliss.
I love that. It's interesting you say this, because I think that when we talk about dopamine, and particularly the challenge of the social media addiction that a lot of us feel, I think, if we're being honest, more of us feel it than we probably care to admit.
Yeah, me and Tom were talking about this. We're like, we need to bring this more to the surface because people aren't aware that it's an addiction. They think it's normal to be on their phone 8 hours a day.
It's wild. It's absolutely wild. I was listening to Theo and Rogan on the way up here for a giggle, and they were talking about this. The longest ever boxing match in history went for like 4 hours and 27 minutes. Back in old school boxing before there were regulated rounds, and it was a round finish when someone was knocked down, which is just wild.
Wow.
Scream CTE. But they were saying that, like, you can't even stay off your phone for 4 hours nowadays, let alone two guys in the ring slugging it out. It's hilarious. It's beside the point that I've been thinking about a lot lately in my life, how when I'm most stimulated, and by stimulated I mean on my phone, making content, editing, podcasting often. I love the podcast, but the edit process and bringing all of that together, it's a lot, and you find yourself stimulated for large periods of time, putting in high volume of work. And when I then start to do that, and I'm in a rush to do that, and I'm putting a mountain of work on top of a mountain of work, I start to overanalyze the back end numbers. And when I'm looking at the outcomes and I'm starting to judge myself based on the outcomes, I'm highly self-critical. And that self-critic is because I'm focused so much on the reward as opposed to the effort. So for me, it's been bringing that back to considering my effort over the reward. And I think it's the same with dopamine. A lot of these dopamine-inducing behaviors that are positive require a level of effort before you get the sense of reward. Those things like ice bath or exercise or going out and actually chatting to friends and spending time with people. It takes the effort of getting out there and doing the thing, as opposed to picking up the phone and spending 2 hours. And you might have a good time scrolling. And even if you think it's a good time, you don't realize the effect it's had on the mentals. And so it is such a learnt behavior that I think at this point in time has to be unlearned. And the only way to unlearn it is to be aware of it.
I think they're doing a lot, the schools, when they want to take away the phone, banning social media till you're 16. Like, they're putting in all these... There must be so many studies proving this for the government and the bodies to have to put in place these rules. I mean, a bit of a side note, but it's on the dopamine topic, is I was listening to a podcast all about pornography and like the addiction to pornography in mainly men, but of course women too. And yeah, it's just this dopamine addiction that we're seeing is crazy. People don't even want to go into the normal life because they can get everything they want from their phone. And then imagine when AI comes into place, and then you're basically going to be able to have a fake girlfriend and live online. And it's like, scares me to think about the future if we don't put in place things now to get people in real life having conversations and again going back to basics.
Yeah, for sure. It's terrifying, and I'm compassionate too. I had a conversation, I think it was with the futurist I had on the podcast, Ben Hamer. Please, Ben, if it wasn't you that I had the conversation with, excuse my ignorance and excuse my memory. But we were speaking about the way that AI is going. And Ben is an incredibly positive, optimistic guy. And so he tries to put an optimistic or positive take on most things, which I love about him. And we were talking about the potential positive benefit that AI could have on people who are feeling lonely and don't have the skills to connect with other people and need to develop that. The problem is, at what point do you remove yourself from developing skills and utilize them in the real world? And I guess the real world is where you exist most of the time. So for some people, the online world is their real world, which is equal parts scary. But I think you have to, at some point in time, get offline and live your life. And I should be doing a better job of that. I want to make a better effort to do that. I find it naturally easier to do so over this period of Christmas, New Year's, where I feel motivated to be out in the sun, to be in the water. I feel less stressed, and I think when I'm less stressed about work, I find it easier to remove myself from the immediate dopamine addiction. And so probably a good challenge for people this Christmas, New Year's time, because it's the best time you can be present with your family, with your people. But social media is such a trap. It's got all of us.
I think one thing I do want to touch on there when you're talking about Christmas and being with your family, it's like, as I did mention, my mum got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer 3 years ago, and like that's been a full battle, and the cancer's now in her lungs. But you don't want it to get to that point that's going to make you realize how important it is to be present with people.
For sure.
And I'm so grateful that I had that, even amongst all the darkness that's come with mum being ill, is that life lesson of nothing beats in-person connection. Nothing beats learning about your friends and your family. There's always more to learn about people. We're all evolving every single day. And I think asking your friends and family, not just the, hey, how are you? Like, let's go deeper this festive season. Like, you know, when you speak to someone, that's why I feel so lucky to do podcasting. And I'm sure you do, because you speak for a long enough period that you go deep and you ask those questions. Like, I really encourage people to go deeper with their loved ones, because often when you share your vulnerabilities or your trauma, that's actually when you connect. You open this pathway of just complete bond with the people in your life. So yeah, that's just my experience of having to go through my mum getting so sick. But the life lesson I would love to project on here is, don't want it to get to that point for you to realize that you going on your phone is just so much less important than being in person with the people you love.
Let me ask you this very personal question, so feel free not to go there if you don't want to. But your mum's diagnosis in this period of the last 3 years, what has it changed about your relationship with her?
Oh my God, everything. Like, truly everything. Because, like, my life changed the moment she got diagnosed, because life became fragile. And when you're a young girl, you don't think about mortality. You don't think about it. And I had to think about it. And yeah, I just was like, all those times that I would go to my family dinners wanting to leave to go to a party or whatever it was, it's like, your family comes first. And my relationship with her is the strongest it ever has been. We're going on a cruise next month to New Zealand, and, you know, she had to shave her head for the second time. And she's like, we're going on this cruise, and she's so positive this whole time. She does her gratitude journal every single day. She's incredible. And I mean, I'm very lucky that my mum is such a positive person. So this experience together is, although so dark, there's definitely silver linings. Not just my relationship with my mum, my relationship with my partner, my relationship with my friends. Like, I'm so aware of how fragile life can be. And I don't want to look back. I don't want it to get to my last day on earth and think, shit, I did it all wrong. I was on my phone. You're never going to get to the last day of your life and be like, I wish I scrolled my phone more. You're going to get to the end of your life and be like, I wish I spent more time with my family. I wish I traveled more. I wish I went and started that business and did my purpose. Like, I think seeing my mum toy with death allowed me to, like, think about my own life, and I don't want to have regrets. It was really powerful.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's an incredibly sentimental message for people to hear, that you don't necessarily appreciate your mortality until you experience your life in a fragile moment, or the life of someone you love in a fragile moment. And I've been blessed through my health experiences to think about life in that way. And it's made me really close with my people. It's made me think quite carefully about the way that I want to live my life. How has all of this changed the way that you've thought about and planned for your own future?
Yeah, well, I never thought I wanted the wedding. I didn't think that much about having kids. And, like, now it's such a big thing that I want. Like, I really want to have a family, because I want my mum to meet my grandchildren, and I want, like, me to be a motherly figure. And, like, I don't know, people have become so far gone on, like, the simple things that matter. Like, the relationship, the statistics on, like, people in relationships has gone down, the population's going down. Like, relationships and connection have just gone down. And
Crazy.
I think, like, going through this has made me realize that is why we're put on earth. Like, my body is created to create life. Like, what a blessing. Like, let's not push that to the side. Like, let's embrace it.
Sure.
Though there's certain, like, learnings that have definitely come from it. And I'm really grateful for that, because we were talking about that hustle culture and that constant drive. And even when I'm going through periods of just crazy, chaotic work, I'm super aware that I need to set out time. Like, even my partner and Tom, we've just moved apartments, and on Boxing Day and the day after, we've put in our schedule staycation, but it's at our apartment, and we're hiding our phones and we're pretending we're on holidays at our house so that we're present together. Like, I think people think, oh, if you're so planned, you lose the spontaneity. But if you're A-type people like ourselves and you're not putting in the time to spend with your loved ones and be present, sometimes you don't stop. And that's why when you were like, holiday season's coming around, it'll be easier for you to be present. I wanted to ask you, does it sometimes come in your mind, oh, should I be working? Like,
oh, bloody oath.
It's
Literally,
the worst.
yeah.
It's the worst.
So this is conversation number 3 for me this week on the pod, and I've got 2 more.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, big week. I've just had a busy month of work, and I wanted to sort of like get a few together. It's also, what this industry is like. When you can catch someone, you catch them.
Yeah.
And you hold on to them tight and you make sure you can record the conversation. So I've had a busy week and am having a busy week for recording. And we go away on Monday and got a few things on this weekend, naturally, just because it's this time of the year, catching up like a 10-year school reunion with some of my mates and some things that I'm really looking forward to. And then Soph and I go away on Monday to see my dad, his partner, and catch up with family in Queensland. And then we go down to see her family in the country immediately after. And I was thinking this morning, I'm driving up here to Sydney and I'm like, do I take the laptop so I can edit a bit? And I'm like, no, I made a commitment to myself that I want to be just incredibly present with my family.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't seen my dad and his partner or my nan or pop for like 6 months.
Wow. I can't even
And
imagine how hard
Yeah, the
that
last time we seen them was, and we're very close. We FaceTime twice a day, my dad and I.
is. Cute.
And so we're super close. So we talk a lot, but I want to give my old man a cuddle, and sit down and have a chat with him. And, we haven't seen them since we got engaged at the end of July.
Aww.
And so I'm so excited for that. And I'm trying my best to get, no matter how much I feel like I should be editing these episodes to get them out, the world won't end if Brad Dryber doesn't release a podcast for 2 weeks.
Absolutely not. Then we're not curing brain cancer here.
Correct. Correct. And I think it's such an important, I love what you said there, because I think that you should take your craft seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. Remember that you are a human and you're allowed to rest and you're allowed to have those moments to relax and indulge in your life.
Yeah.
Because there will always be more work. There'll always be another week to release a podcast, but there won't always be another Christmas at Dad's.
No.
My pop's got dementia, so this, touch wood, it's not, but this very well could be the last time that we get Pop for Christmas. And so I want to enjoy that and I want to be present with them. And it's the best thing about this time of the year that I love is I love the limbo between Christmas and the New Year, where it doesn't matter what day of the week it is.
That's the best.
Doesn't matter what is usually on your schedule on a Tuesday. It's just Tuesdays become beach days and Wednesdays become days with people you love, and you get to just indulge in life. And so I'm making the most conscious effort I possibly can to actually enjoy that.
Yeah. I really resonate. I think we're similar in that regard.
For sure.
That's why one of the questions that I have in the journal every morning is, what would make today great? And often what would make today great would be a swim in the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
What would make today great would be like having a really beautiful conversation with my partner, or like cooking myself dinner instead of getting Uber Eats. Like, often it's not work related. Like, what would make today great? Like, life is more than work. And yeah, when you're so passionate about what you do, having the awareness that you do, some, men who are in business don't have the awareness. And then they do go to their family Christmas and they're on their phone the whole time.
For sure.
So yeah, I mean, kudos to you for having that awareness, and your whole family is going to be so grateful for how attentive you'll be.
Yeah, and I'm the golden child. My sister will hate hearing that. So they'll love having me there for Christmas. Hey, I want to ask, you spoke about the desire to be a mum and to bring children or a child into the world. And that's such an incredible privilege that I know my partner and I are very excited about in years to come. For you personally, how do you feel about being 29 and having those plans? Do you feel a sense of urgency? Do you feel, because we know it's so difficult for women, and I have a level of compassion for women, because there is a clock that is ticking, and maybe it's a little bit longer and it's a little bit more relaxed than it used to be, but there is a certain point where it gets much more difficult to have children. you're in the peak of your career, you're in the prime of everything you're doing. Do you feel a pressure and a stress to pull the trigger on kids?
It's so funny because 2 years ago I would have felt absolutely it would ruin my career, it would damage my whatever else. But now I'm in the phase of my life where I can still podcast, like I can still sell journals. Like I've created my life where there is flexibility amongst it. I can still create social content. So maybe 2 years ago there was such a financial loss because I wouldn't be able to model, but now I feel like I'll still be able to hold myself. I've also recently, I don't know if your audience is that into it, but I've recently gone off the birth control pill. And I'm sure many of your audience, if they are men, their partners have gone off the birth control. And it's like a really crazy time for women. I was on it for 12 years, went off the pill, and like my hormones have all gone crazy. So it's been really hard to regulate my cycle. But the reason I went off is because I want to get my body in balance so that I can have children. So hopefully next year I'll do the test where you test how many eggs you have.
Yeah.
And then from there make a decision. If there's a good amount of eggs, then that's fine. I'll wait another year. But I was literally talking to Tom the other day. I said to him, I'm so not opposed to having my own kids at my wedding. Like I think that's really cute. And I think a lot of women in their head have like this timeline. And do men as well? Do they think I want to have the wedding first, then kids? Is that a common?
Potentially. I think for us, it's naturally going to happen that way. Like we spoke about this because I guess you get to a point where, you know, I'm 28, so we're very similar age. Sophie's 27. She's a year younger than me. And we sat down very early in our relationship. We've been together for just over 2 years now. 2 years, 2 months.
No, you're a good boyfriend knowing this.
Yeah, I know these things. I'm good with dates. And we sat down and said, okay, what do we want from the next 5 years of our life? And what's the order of priorities? And for us, it was more important to have certain things over other things. Now, we didn't really resonate with the idea of a very traditional wedding. We, on our list of priorities, naturally, engagement come before wedding. And so we got engaged the 28th of July this year, and we're tossing up, what do we want to do? Do we want to just do something very small with our family, sign the paperwork, essentially the courthouse thing, go and elope overseas, and do a bit of travel? Because we knew that we wanted to potentially have one really good overseas trip together before we did kids. Now, I should caveat this, that because of my CF, we can't have kids naturally. So we have to go down the IVF route. So you don't have to be preventative about having kids. We don't have to stress that, like, we're going to have a miracle. If we were going to have a miracle baby, we would have known by now.
And it would also be like,
For sure. So we're like, okay, we know that we're going to be relatively planned when it comes to kids' time because IVF is a process. So let's get in a good trip first. And it just so happened that we're getting married in the south of France next year now, just with our family. So there's 14 of us going over. And it's going to be the most beautiful time creating memories together, and we'll travel and then we'll come home and hopefully do the kids thing. But I would say that there is a sense of pressure and time pressure that we handle relatively well, but I've got the most beautiful relationship with my parents, and I think as a man I look to my dad as a great role model, and I love it when I head up to see him for Christmas time. There is all love but no love when we step on the pickleball court or when we get down to the gym. Like, it will be, let's compete against each other and let's go hard to see who the man is this Christmas. And the thing I love about that is he's still young enough to be active with me and come for a run with me or go to the gym with me. And I love that about our relationship. And I love that growing up, he was an active, fit dad. And so I want to be able to be that for my children too. And if I'm blessed enough to do that, God willing, touch wood, I think that means we have kids relatively soon. And so there is a sense of urgency because I want to be that kind of parent.
Yeah.
I know you probably resonate with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, my partner's 35. So I guess like if I was to wait 2 years, he would be 37. But he's always like, I'm going to live to 120, so it doesn't matter. He's like, I'm so healthy, it's fine. Touch wood as well. We're just like touching wood the entire time. But I mean, for me, I need to get my body balanced before I can make any decisions. But yeah, I think I'm also in a friendship group where not many of us have had kids. I think many women aren't having kids until their 30s now. So if I was to have a kid now, I'd be one of the first in my group at 29, which is crazy.
What do you think, for our generation, what do you think will, in the next 10 years, be the median age of people having kids? Like 35?
I don't think it... Look, I think part of it is women not wanting to have kids early because they are chasing a career. But a big part of it is that women can't find the right partner. And
big time, yeah.
Exactly. So I think the age will go up. But I had an IVF doctor on my podcast, and she talks about that after you turn 30 and then by 35, it's like your fertility goes down so much. And that's not even touching on the environmental factors that are impacting women's fertility. The preservatives in our food, pesticides, the water we're drinking, things that we can't really not go without because it's everywhere. So, yeah, I think it's interesting. And I think especially in Sydney, it's different. I'm sure like up on the Gold Coast, people still have kids a bit younger.
Well, we're from the Gong.
Okay.
So we're south. Probably similar to here. But funnily enough, Sophie's from the country. And in the country, everyone has kids much earlier.
Yes.
It's just, I think, because
people are hustling here.
For sure.
You know?
For sure. There is a hustle culture here, which I get because people are, you should be excited about your career and the thing you do professionally. But I've seen I'm in the real estate industry, and I've seen so many examples of people who are so obsessed with work and unfortunately realize maybe later than they should have that work isn't your life. It's a part of it. And so, it's for me incredibly important to prioritize family and those experiences with the people I love over everything.
Yeah.
And so it's something that's definitely on our mind. You spoke about coming off the pill, which for a lot of women in Australia is introduced, of course, as a preventative to falling pregnant, but for a lot of people for skin, right? And I think when you're introduced to the pill for your skin health very early in your life, it kind of just stays around.
It was just masking all that's happening underneath the surface.
For sure. And you spoke about, whether this is TMI or not for the audience, but I think it's actually...
I'm open book.
I think it's really important because it's such an important part of the female health process, and it's important for guys to understand this too. You spoke about getting back to regular cycles of your period again. It's probably something that as a guy you don't think about much, that naturally when you're taking a hormone, something to control or change your hormones, you are essentially disrupting the body's regular cycles. Has it been really hard to get back to what you call a normal cycle, a normal period?
Yes, it's been so hard. And I think I want to also let your audience know that a woman has a cycle and it's not just her period. She has 4 parts of her cycle. And I think men don't understand this.
Yeah, I certainly don't.
Like
so indulge me in this.
So you have your period, which is your menstruation. Then you go into your follicular phase, which is when you start getting a bit more energy, start feeling good. Then you have your ovulation phase, which is when you're fertile. So you can only fall pregnant like 3 or 4 days of your entire cycle. So if you actually track this, you would be able to have safer sex without being on birth control and taking a pill every day. But when you're ovulating, that's when you can fall pregnant. So as a woman, you're feeling more social, more out there. As a woman in a relationship, you might be more loving, more passionate with your partner. And then after that, if the egg isn't fertilized by the male, you go into a luteal phase, which is when your hormones are going down, you're starting to feel a little more weak, you might need more carbohydrates, you need to eat differently. And then you menstruate again. And no one teaches men this because a woman changes so much in her 28-day cycle. And I think it would be so amazing for men and women in relationships to share this knowledge, so you can be like to my partner, I might be a little bit more sensitive right now, I'm in my luteal phase, or I'm actually feeling really outgoing, maybe we should do a double date. And having that vocabulary and knowledge, first of all, should be at schools for both men and women, because so many women don't understand their cycle, or they're put on the birth control pill, so you don't have those 4 phases. So your question was, how's it been regulating after the pill? It's been really difficult. It took me 3 months to even have a period for the first time. And my skin broke out. It was so moody. But now it's been nearly a year and I'm finally feeling like myself, and it feels like I can see again. Like the pill was just making me this duller version of myself. And for your women listeners, I think you should definitely speak to a naturopath or a health professional if you want to go off the birth control, because when you're on the birth control, it's really impacts your gut health. And as we all know, gut health is crucial for your overall health. So you want to make sure all your levels are okay, and then you can figure that out. So when you go off the pill, maybe your symptoms won't be as bad as what I suffered with. But I'm so happy to be off the pill, and I went on it at 15, and I'm not against the pill because it's given freedom to women to,
For sure.
you know, have the same kind of play as men, you know, don't have to risk falling pregnant. But also, I think there's not enough knowledge and information out there for women to make the right decision when it comes to birth control. So many women are on the pill and they're not even having any sex.
Yeah, well, you know, if you're starting at 14, 15 on the pill, like it's very early prevention.
And apparently the doctors are just throwing it at people these days. As soon as you're young, you go into there. And I guess, like, we're not going to go deep into all the big pharma and all of that, but it's like they really are throwing so many things at us to take, and it's impacting our gut.
Well, I think that when you don't understand the potential consequences of what's involved with taking a medication or that kind of preventative, and there are so many people on it, so it's not exactly taboo. It's very normal for young Australian women, and it's very normal for a young guy in Australia to have a partner on the pill. And when you don't understand those consequences, and then you have to consider coming off it to be able to have children, and the array of challenges that come post it, I think it comes back to awareness. If you're aware of it, you know how to plan for it, and you can make an educated decision. So an educated decision is far greater than a decision out of deception. And so I think, yeah, the education of this is so important, and such an incredible role of podcasts and these things play today, because people who have health shows, or, you know, like for yourself, a wellness show where you can have a fertility doctor on, so much valuable information that people usually wouldn't have access to.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing, as much as we were, you know, talking about social media addiction and all these terrible things, we've also seen such a rise in knowledgeable podcasts and people wanting to listen to them. So we're seeing this rise. Like, people want this information out there. And so I love sharing this stuff. I love being TMI. Like, I literally put on my story, I got my period, like, for the first time when I went off the pill, and like floods of messages, because so many girls are going through the same thing. I have friends who haven't had a period for 3 years since they went off the pill. And it's like, that is so scary. So your period is your 5th vital sign. It's telling you that you're healthy. When something is not right, the first thing that goes away is your period, because it's not essential. Like, it's not to have a child. Your body doesn't want you to have a child unless you're healthy. So it's a big telltale sign that maybe you're stressed, maybe you're under eating, maybe you're over exercising. And I think, again, in this hustle and bustle culture, everything has been done on the men's 24-hour clock. Nothing has been done for women who have a 28-day cycle, and we can't run at the same pace as men. We're just not built the same, and I think we're seeing a real change, because feminism was kind of seen as we're equal to men, but I think we can achieve just as much. It's just a different route to get there, and the systems need to be put in place to allow women to, like, maybe work from home when they're menstruating. Certain things just to give us that feel like we're being supported by the government, by the bodies. I think it's a whole topic that we need to be speaking louder about.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great point. A point that you don't necessarily think about as a guy all the time. So it's a healthy perspective.
And then the whole government, the majority of the government are men.
For sure,
so
which doesn't help.
Yeah,
it doesn't help. I think that's why there's such an importance in having equal representation in different areas that can make decisions and be aware of important information in making decisions. I want to ask you a question and metaphorically hit the ball back over the fence, because this week you asked me, what does wellness mean to you? So I want to ask you that big, broad picture question. What does wellness mean to you?
Well, I think wellness means being happy and being comfortable in your skin. And when I think about wellness, I think about the different areas. You've got emotional, spiritual, physical. You need to be well in all those areas. And for so long of my life, I only focused on my physical wellness. And the puzzle pieces only fell into place when I focused on the mind. So wellness to me is a balance of all the areas. And yeah, that's wellness to me.
And so for you, what's the philosophy to personally achieve that? What does that look like?
I think routines are everything. Like, routines change my life. Every morning, non-negotiables. I wake up, no phone. I do my meditation in front of my LED light, habit stack, easy. Get my circadian rhythm flowing, Ayurvedic meditation, thinking about my mantra, or if I'm feeling a little bit out of focus, I'll put a guided one on, and then I do my gratitude journal, and that just sets the tone. That's before physical movement. That is setting the energy for the day and the way I react to things in my life. Such a shift. I used to be so irritable, like touch me and I'll shout, and now I feel so much more calmer in my body. So I guess finding that wellness and that philosophy is starting with the mind, and everything else happens afterwards.
So how long does that take you in the morning?
So Ayurvedic meditation is 20 minutes and the journal takes 3 to 5 minutes.
Oh, so that's a pretty easy routine for people to think about. You know, most people have 30 minutes at the start of their day.
Yeah,
if they're
it's
waking
so
up
simple.
early enough.
And obviously first thing, have a massive glass of water.
Yeah, I'm so thirsty when I wake up.
Good.
Smash the electrolytes.
Amazing.
Yeah, I've been taking that, I think it's LMNT.
Yeah,
It's got like 1,000 milligrams of sodium.
so good.
And I stay hydrated for the whole day.
Yeah,
Just gets me off on the right foot.
so good.
And that's not a sponsored ad either.
Yeah.
I wish it was a sponsored ad, but
Yeah.
it's not. For you with exercise, I know that there's a bunch of different things that you do. I know you lift weights. I know you go to PT, Pilates a little bit too. And I know you love
instructor now.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go for anyone who's interested. And I know that you love walking too. I did hear you say on a podcast episode of yours that you have you've obviously got a great discipline, but you walk the line between discipline and balance very well, where it seems that you listen to your body when it doesn't feel like your day.
Well, that's come from going off the pill and understanding my cycle and when I got my period back for the first time, it came back from after going to Europe, where I was eating a bit more. At that time, I was having a few drinks and I got my period back. So it was like your body needs to rest to get into like its proper flow. I'm just such a big believer, like low impact workouts are so impactful. And one of the biggest reasons people pass away when you get older, it's mobility. You fall over, you trip. So like stretching, foam rolling. It doesn't always have to be like go hard at the gym and someone's screaming at you. Like just not how it has to be all the time.
I love a walk more than the next bloke. Like
He does a hot girl walk.
I love a hot boy walk with Soph in the morning.
Yeah.
Down near the water. I just think it feels great for your body. It feels great for my mind.
And also connecting with your fiance.
For sure. It's such a nice time to be out in the fresh air. And one of the things I noticed this week, it sounds terrible because we're talking about health and wellness, but I've had gout so many times this year. Genetically, my pop and my dad get it.
Yeah.
Been on long-term preventative. And my health is such a tricky puzzle with the liver disease and the cystic fibrosis. There's so many different things going on. We haven't figured out how to avoid it this year. And I eat a pretty good diet, pretty low purine, which is a difficulty for gout. And so I got smashed with it this week. Oh. And my left foot was so bad. Probably the most pain I've ever been in. This is not a sympathy vote, but very relevant what we're talking about. My left foot was so bad. I was on crutches for a couple of days. And I thought, this is why you have to stay mobile. Because imagine being like this when you're 8. This is what it would feel like to be 85.
I know.
And I'm only 28, granted. So I've got some work to do to make sure that isn't a reality of the future. But your mobility and your movement are so crucial to the quality of your life as you get older.
Well, you said you want to be a young granddad and you want to be healthy. It's like that doesn't just happen overnight. It takes good habits every single day.
100%, 100%. And so I think it's so important to exercise, and which is such a simple thing to say, but all of the longevity journals and medical research now are suggesting that exercise may be the pound for pound best way to remain healthy for long periods of time. And I think we're starting to understand more about it than ever. And the fact that a guy like Dr. Andrew Huberman can have the third most listened to podcast in the world, I think it says a lot about the curiosity of people and their wellness and their health. So it's an exciting time to be in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. It does blow my mind because I love Huberman, but I'm even like, this is sciencey. Like, this is proper.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think he does an incredible job of keeping it very, very digestible for people.
Oh, yeah.
But we just live in a world now where I think it's brilliant that people can have access to that. We're in the Mentored studios here in Sydney, and I know Mark Burris, he's recently launched Project 100, and his emphasis on that journey of longevity and health and well-being for himself and for other people to have access to that information is really important to Mark, and I love it. I think we exist in a time now where you have more information at your hands than ever, which means you do have to do a good job of sifting through what is real and what isn't. It takes a bit of cross-referencing. But, God, it's an exciting time to invest energy and time into your health.
100%. I love that.
Hey, I want to ask you one last thing before we finish up. It's the end of the year. Likely, I would think that you're doing some reflection on the year that was. What's something that you're incredibly proud of this year, but also what's something that equally you think, I want to change that about next year?
So proud. Creating a community, creating the Self-Dom community has blown me away. Having monthly events, we have a walk club, and it's just grown, and it's been incredible. And yeah, just I think this year I launched a journal, I launched a community, like so much happened in 1 year. And I think, yeah, just a testament to putting one foot in front of the other, because I never really set out with set goals. But just doing something I loved every day led to these things, and reflecting in December has been so nice. I think one thing I want to change is, the digital, like really let go of the attachment to numbers and the attachment to seeing what everyone else is doing, because it's never gonna, my mum always said, comparison's a thief of joy. We've all heard it. And that's why one of the prompts in the journal every night is I let go of. It's still now been journaling for 7 years, and I still every single night have so many things to let go of, because as humans we have a negativity bias. So I don't really want to like tear myself apart, because it's natural for us to think of the worst, but we have the ability now to be aware of it and to let it go. So yeah, just letting go of any attachment to numbers and just too much social media time.
I love it. Dom, it's been a pleasure. I'm going to make sure that everywhere listeners can find you, viewers can find you, is in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. That was good fun.
That was so fun.